All right. No questions. If you do have questions, unmute and we can talk about it. This call is designed for answering your guys' questions and then just anything that we want to cover. So today, I want to cover a couple questions that I got this week that I think will be helpful for you. We're going to go over backup offers and notices and acceptance. So I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see it. Okay, so what I've got here is the secondary backup contract and addendum to the real estate purchase contract. So in a scenario where your client is going to be put in a backup position, this addendum is going to be needed for that. It's also really important if you represent the seller and you want to put a person in a backup position that you don't just go ahead and accept their offer and hope that, and then just tell them, hey, we're in a backup position. What that can create for you is, so we're going to take it first from the seller's perspective, and then we'll go into the buyer's perspective, and then we'll kind of go into this addendum. From the seller's perspective, you go ahead and you get multiple offers. You decide that you want to put, you've got one that you're going to accept, and then one you're going to put up at a backup position. The whole idea of the backup position is so that I don't have to put it back on the MLS. I don't have to activate it. I don't have to get more offers. I like these two offers. I'm going to go with this one. If it doesn't go through, then I'm moving into the second offer really easy. That's the only reason you would want to put up a backup offer. If you have multiple offers, they're all good. And you want, you don't know which one you would put in the backup position. My recommendation is not putting it in a backup position. It would be just, we're going to notify you if the primary one falls out, and then you guys can rewrite your offer and put it in. But this is a scenario where you actually want to put them in a backup position. The advantage to that is obviously you don't have to put it back on the market. You don't have to go through the negotiating again. The disadvantage is once you've accepted them as a backup offer, if your primary offer cancels, that as it's written at first is going to come in as the primary offer. So it's going to be similar to negotiating with the primary offer. You want to make sure all the terms are okay with their offer. You don't want to look at their offer and say, oh, okay, well, we'll just put you in a backup position, and if it falls through, then we can tighten up the dates, we can fix the things. You want to just have the offer as just the way your seller wants it and the buyer wants it before you accept a backup offer. Because once it goes into the primary position, it's going to be hard to change. It's not that you can't change it, just like any other contract, but if the buyer says, I'm not going to change it, you can't just change it by that. Okay, so you write a normal REPSI, and then you're going to have this as an addendum. You need to have this as an addendum to have them put in a backup position, mainly because it talks about all the backup criteria. The first part of this is the same as any other addendum. It's including all of the other prior addendums. Number one, this explains it. Backup contract. Buyer acknowledged that the REPSI is in a backup contract. The seller has already contract to sell the property to another buyer based on a primary contract. The primary contract was accepted on such and such date. So that's something that if you're a buyer and you're filling this out, you're going to want to call the listing agent and present and find out what that date is. If you're the listing agent and you've accepted it, you would already have known this date, and you can counter their REPSI with this addendum. So it can come from either side. It doesn't really matter on that. The seller's right to modify. Okay, this is important for buyers to understand. The buyer agrees the seller may, in seller's sole discretion, amend the primary contract. Okay, so the question I get on this is this referring to our contract, or is this referring to the one that they're already under contract? And this one is specifically referring to the one under contract. So it has nothing to do with this buyer, but the buyer's given them permission to say, hey, if you need to go change that one, so their dates or whatever they need to do on that other primary contract, this is just notifying them that you can still do that. So you can make changes to the primary contract any way you want. You can change deadlines, you can change price. You're going to be working that transaction just as a normal transaction. And then the backup position, you're not really working that one, you're kind of putting it off to the side. 1.3, buyer's right to cancel. Okay, at any time prior to the backup contract becoming primary contract as provided in section 1.4 below, buyer may cancel the backup contract by providing written notice to the seller. Okay, and I'm going to go over notices and acceptance here in a second, but this is basically saying I just need to let them know I'm going to have a written notice to the seller that we're backing out. I'm pulling out of this contract so that you can move forward with another deal. You can write other offers on other properties. All of that's just fine. As soon as you go under contract with something different, you're going to notify the seller that yours is no longer in the backup position. Termination of the primary contract. If the primary contract is canceled or withdrawn, seller will, within 4 days after such event, provide buyer written notice of termination. So if you're the listing agent on a contract that's just canceled, you have 4 days. Okay, and these are interpreted as calendar days, not business days. So 4 days to provide written notice that the cancellation has occurred, and then that puts the next buyer in primary position. So except as provided in section 1.3. So unless they cancel, if they cancel, then you don't, obviously you just put it back on the market as you normally would. Okay, number 2, contract deadlines. So this is where it really helps your buyers, is this is going to start right after they've given you notice. So if they give you notice, this is days after, and you're going to put the number of days here. So you're not going to put a specific date, you're just going to put a number of days. Seller's disclosures, 5 days, due diligence, 10 to 14 days, financing appraisal, 15 to 30 days, whatever is your normal, so that as a buyer, you're not really, when you're in a backup position, you're really not doing anything with that property. You're not doing inspections, you're not going to go look at it. You're pretty much just have it off to the side, and when it's off to the side, you're not really pursuing it. That's why this is in here. So the question I get a lot is in the rep C, let's say I put deadlines in the rep C. So I did a multiple offer, I have actual deadlines in the rep C, and then they counter me with this addendum. This addendum, because it's coming after the rep C, these dates are going to control. So even though I put deadlines in my rep C, if I have this, it says right here, including all prior addendums, if not modified by this addendum. So it's now modifying the rep C. So these deadlines are going to take place. So you don't have to worry about those deadlines you put in the rep C in section 24, because this will supersede that. Now, let's say you're a buyer and you're presenting an offer, you already know it's going to be a backup position. That's where in the rep C, you probably wouldn't put specific dates on there. I would just write in C addendum, whatever, just say this is addendum 1. C addendum 1 is referring to this. This is specifically talking about those deadlines. This helps us here, just in case those deadlines land on, so you have 2.4, the settlement deadline, and it's only referring to the settlement deadline, but if it falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or state or federal holiday, performance shall be required on the next succeeding business day. Okay, so that's basically, because I'm going to put 20 days in there, I don't know when they're going to give me notice. If they give me notice and then that throws it on to, let's say there's a holiday on Friday and that's when the date is, well, the next business day is going to be the next Monday. So my closing isn't going to be on Friday, and they can't force me to close on Thursday. So that is a scenario where I would close on Monday. Another difference with this one is earnest money deposit. So the rep C says it's got to be deposited at the brokerage within 4 days. This one says the buyer agrees to deliver the brokerage no later than 7 days after buyer's receipt of seller's notice. So this gives me 7 days instead of the 4 on the REPC. So it's because this is addendum after the REPC, this is going to supersede the REPC. So now I have 7 days to get it in from that point. Okay, any questions on the backup addendum, the actual addendum itself? Okay. Okay, so now we're in a backup position. Everything's right. We've got our contracts in place. I'm just sitting on the sideline. The primary offer cancels. Now what do I do? If I'm the listing agent in the MLS, there's a seller's notice of backup of buyer's termination of primary contract. So it's under this, it's saying I have, as a listing agent, I have 4 days. So right here, seller within 4 days after such event, buyer they'll send a notice. This is the notice that you have to send. Okay, basically it's just saying on addendum 1 of the REPC on the secondary backup contract, based on section 4 of the contract, buyer notice, seller gives notice the buyer is now primary, has been terminated, and the buyer is advised that the buyer's backup contract with seller is now in primary contract. Okay, so they've given notice. So here's one caution. We saw this last year that I want you to be really careful with, especially if you represent the listing agent. Okay, so the listing agent said, hey, we're going to give you notice that we have a backup position, so I have a backup position. Okay. And what happened was the current buyer with the primary offer had a problem with their loan, and their financing deadline was later, it was today. And so they're saying, yeah, we're going to cancel the contract. We're going to cancel the contract. And the agent said, okay, if you're going to cancel the contract, they went ahead and sent this over to the backup offer. And then at like 4 o'clock that afternoon, the primary offer who was in there said, oh, wait, no, we've got it figured out. We're going to go ahead and close. We've got another solution. And now I've got a problem because now I've notified them and now they're under contract and the primary didn't cancel like they said they were going to cancel. They didn't cancel. So now we created a problem for the seller because now the seller is going to have to default on the second buyer, and that causes lots of problems. So don't cancel or terminate the contract until the buyer has officially canceled their deal. So there needs to be a cancellation of the primary contract before you move the backup contract into that position. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to go from there to what notices and acceptance really mean. So if we go, this next section I'm going to talk about is in the actual REPC. Okay, the REPC defines that for us. First one is in section 18, talks about notices. Okay, except as provided in section 23, and we'll go to 23 in a second, all notices required under the REPC must be 1, in writing, and 2, signed by the buyer or seller giving notice, and 3, received by the buyer or seller or their respective agent or by the brokerage firm representing the buyer or the seller no later than the applicable date referenced in the REPC. Okay, so if I'm giving a notice, I have to do a notice of cancellation, a notice of termination. All of those things, there's 3 things that have to be done. You have to have it in writing, it has to be signed by them, and then it has to be given to, received by either the buyer, the seller, their agents, or if they sent it to the brokerage, that's considered receiving it. Okay, so that's one reason it's really important to use dot loop, because we can go back in and there's a timestamp of exactly when that is sent. And so we can go back and say, okay, it was sent in time, they received it, we're good, and we can cancel because the notice was given. If you don't use that, you're using your own system. As a brokerage, we're going to have to ask for some proof that you actually sent it in time, especially if we're getting really close to the time. Okay, so remember those three things on notices, because we're going to move down to acceptance, and there's a difference between these. So just to reiterate that, it's got to be in writing, it's got to be signed, and it has to be delivered. Okay, it's got to be given to them. Okay, now if I jump down to 23, now this is acceptance. Okay, acceptance occurs only when all of the following have occurred. Okay, one, buyer or seller or buyer has signed the offer or counter offer where noted to indicate acceptance. Okay, so one, they've signed it. And then two, seller or buyer or their agent has communicated to the other party or to the other party's agent that the offer or counteroffer has been signed as required. Okay, so now number two is it's communicated. So number one, signed, communicated. It has nothing to do with delivered. And that's where a lot of us get mixed up is, oh, they accepted the addendum. The agent called, said they signed it, they've accepted it. Now we're moving forward. And I said, but I didn't receive it. So if I didn't receive it, then we're not moving forward. Those are only for notices. Notices have to be received. Obviously, you're going to send them the contract, but in order to have acceptance, you just need those two things: signed, communicated. So if you don't want it to be, this is that scenario where I sent out an addendum and then I decided I don't want to accept that. And instead of picking up the phone, we've always heard those jokes where you pick up the phone and says, we're rejecting our offer, we're canceling our offer, versus, oh, you said, oh, I accepted it. That's where we get that kind of a mentality, is in the acceptance side of it versus just the notices. So if I'm going to cancel my contract, I sign it and I tell them, but I don't deliver it, that doesn't work as a notice. But if I'm accepting their counteroffer, I'm accepting the addendum, then I would just have to say those two things. So hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on any of that today? Notices, acceptance, or any of that? Okay. Any other questions about any other things? That's all I got for you today. So short call.
Great information. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thanks, Chris. All right. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.